Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2023. And this time I'd like to focus on a film which is actually included in a wonderful collector set of a number of films, and this set is given the spine number collectively of 1194. And I'm speaking of this work, or this set, which is Tod Browning's Sideshow Shockers. So there are a number of films included in this set. And so today, if you don't mind, I'd like to focus our attention, if I may, on one such film. It is a work which is described as being from the year 1932, and the director is indeed Tod Browning. And the name of the work is Freak. This is the work. This is the truly unforgettable, one-of-a-kind work, a type of epic that is directed by Tod Browning, based upon the story Spurs by Todd Robbins, and we'll talk a little bit about that later when we get into a discussion of the supplements. And among its very memorable cast, we have people like Wallace Ford and Leela Hyams and Olga Baklanova and Henry Victor, and also we have Harry Earls and Daisy Earls and others. This is the work, as I say, the unforgettable, one-of-a-kind work, which is Freaks, Tod Browning's Freaks. And it emerges courtesy of this Criterion Collection multi-disc Blu-ray set, which is what I have here on the table. It has two discs. One of which being the disc which houses the film Freaks, along with certain supplements, and I have the disc in the player right now, so you can see on display the very ornate Blu-ray menu and the like. Very interesting artwork indeed for a very interesting film, Freaks. If we were to try to describe this work, Freaks, in terms of the plot or story structure, we could say it does focus on the sideshow, carnival, circus atmosphere and arena. And while we get glimpses of the show itself in terms of the performances played in front of, say, big tent audiences, such as the trapeze artistry of Cleopatra, the Olga Baklanova character, very early on in the film, primarily one can say that this film Freaks is focusing in on the behind the scenes or behind the curtain activity of this world and this lifestyle and this way of life of a band or a group of traveling circus performers and sideshow performers. And the sideshow performers, we meet many of them over the course of this film, either in passing or perhaps some a little bit more involved, again, depending on how much can be devoted in its very limited screen time. It's just shy of, it's just a little bit over 60 minutes. So but despite the, relatively speaking, short length of time in terms of the running time of the film, we do meet a lot of people. And for instance, we meet the characters portrayed by Harry Earls and Daisy Earls, Hans and Frida. We also meet the characters portrayed by Prince Randian or Johnny Eck or Angelo Rosito and others. And so these are people who are within the world of the circus, and they are the sideshow performers, and their performances in the context of the sideshow world is a focus of a type of fascination on the part of the audiences, but also it's straddling the line between fascination and exploitation, which also can be said to be part of the way of perhaps dealing with or reckoning with or interpreting perhaps simultaneously, all at once, a viewing of this film Freaks by Tod Browning. But part of the film's fame, and part of the film's, one of the reasons why it is very famous the way it is throughout the course of cinema history is its cast. And so when we, the viewer, meet many of these performers for the first time or throughout the course of the film, we perhaps undergo also that sense of perhaps indirectly or subconsciously, perhaps being in the position of the spectator, in the sense of the sideshow aspect of this film. So it has a type of double or triple effect, which I think is one of the reasons for its power and also for its controversy, because I think we are asked, or perhaps we are forced, to confront this idea of this work as art and or as exploitation, which I think is a question that is really covered and addressed really well in some of the supplements that we find included with the Blu-ray that has the Film Freaks with its supplements. And as I say, we'll talk a little bit about that over the course of the video later on in this. But in any event, what's so really quite fascinating too about this is that it has the behind the curtain aspect to it, which means that we get a sense within the film's terms. It is a type of narrative construction where you have this community of sideshow performers surrounded. They seem to be shunned from society. At least that's the assumption being made by certain offhand remarks we hear from, say, other people in the stock company, and that also includes the way in which the characters portrayed by the Hercules and Cleopatra characters are, we see throughout the course of the film, slowly but surely perhaps hatching a plot that involves exploiting the feelings of Hans, the Harry Earl's character, for Cleopatra in favor, or in the hopes of perhaps trying to obtain a large fortune that he is heir to. So therein lies not just the act of exploitation, not just the act of kind of danger and means, but also a very real threat, both physically and emotionally, that is also occurring. While at the same time, we are privy to all these sort of short stories or excerpts or little dramas that are unfolding, marriages, relationships, births, children being born, just talking with people as they're walking amongst the traveling cars, the traveling vans, other characters that are breaking up, but then they meet other people and they fall in love again, and sort of the types of soap opera tactics that are at work to try to show the quote-unquote behind the curtain sensibilities of this traveling circus community. And so in that way we have a series of stories or vignettes which could be said to be playing like an ensemble piece of human drama. I think that's one way of looking at it as well. But there is always, or perhaps it is inescapable, this type of looking at the film as well through the lens of fascination slash exploitation. Or is it fascination or is it exploitation? That type of continuing questioning, I think, occurs every time, because there are ways in which these types of moments of quote-unquote human drama are also relying on the physical trait or the physical attribute, or the ways in which the performers or the people in question are performing in the sideshow performance aspect. And so that type of a way in which, say, the relationship between certain characters, how will this play out considering that, or in the context of the physical trait that they are exhibiting. And so this always becomes a really interesting and perhaps uncomfortable type of give and take or ebb and flow in terms of a viewing of this work. Namely, it is tempting, and I think it is very possible to look at those moments as real human drama excerpts, and I think that's very much part of the case. It is also part of the discussion to say that the way into those, or the way in which the film is introducing those, or it's wrapping those human dramas around the physical traits themselves. And so query whether or not, again, this is straddling the line between fascination on the one hand and or exploitation on the other. It's a really, I think, challenging and thought-provoking a way of looking at this film, not just in terms of the content, but also as we, as the viewers, engage with it. It's really fascinating, and I, for one, don't have any answers except that as a film that makes itself available, I make the choice to watch it and engage with it in certain ways. And I always find it to be very thought provoking and very, very challenging indeed. But I think its challenges and brilliance also come with the fact that it is very multi textured and multi-layered, in that, as I suggested, it could be seen as a almost a I don't want to say I don't want to say it is a documentary, but it plays similarly to a type of, say, pseudo documentary style, in the sense of getting behind the curtain. I'm not suggesting it is, because it is, I think, very much a narrative film, although it is perhaps borrowing from certain aspects of what spectators might be expecting from the sideshow performances on the one hand, but also be surprised to watch and engage with in these various, say, subplots, considering the sideshow performance physical traits that are on display with each of these performers in question. So, or at the subject, at the heart of these little short stories, these vignettes, as it were. So, it has that already multi-layered or multi-level edge, even within its, say, its interpretation as a human drama. It is also considered, I think, it has a really lovely soap opera dynamic, people in terms of relationships, love triangles, and plots that are hatched. I mentioned Cleopatra and the relationship that she has with the Harry Earls character, and how that really develops, or it turns into something quite dark and quite sinister. And so it has the moments of soap opera with light touches, but also very dark and devilish touches as well. And also this idea of retribution and revenge. Revenge is a dish that is best served cold. My goodness, if that's the case, then there are many chills that could be said to be at sub-zero temperatures, in the ways in which things are found out, motivations are revealed, and when those motivations are revealed, the retribution is truly mighty and frightening indeed. So it also has this level as a revenge tale. It has also been described, I think, or perhaps it is. I've seen it described in the way that it's been marketed. The film is marketed over the years. Sometimes it's described as a horror film. And I think it is possible, or to keep in mind that type of label in the context of the revenge retribution tale aspect to this. But that label itself, I think, brings us full circle into how we view the film Freaks in terms of the spectator subject matter relationship, and the line between fascination, curiosity, and exploitation. But there are moments too that have a genuine chill and fright, and when those moments occur, they are very, very scary indeed. That's to say that this film, I think, is really warping itself in ways that are undeniable, unforgettable. This film, when it was released, we understand, was so controversial, and I think that controversy has continued on throughout the years to the present day. And so even now, in the context of the Criterion release, I think there are certain points of controversy that the Criterion release itself cannot avoid, and we'll talk a little bit about those touches when we get into some of the supplements here. But I think that is one of the reasons, in fact, why this film Freaks not only has a resonance and power, but I think it also has a very important and critical place in the context of Tod Browning's filmography, as well as the history of early sound cinema from the 1930s. Although there are some really great techniques in this film that are very much part of the silent film tradition, and the way that certain title cards are used, or the way that blocking or the way the staging is occurring. I mean, there's some brilliant silent film techniques that are on display, while also exhibiting some wonderful sound techniques as well in terms of the decor and the outside and the rain and the weather and the lightning and thunder. I mean, these are some really frightening moments that are very much well captured in terms of a cinematic experience. And the performances too. I mean, I really want to emphasize just how great these performances are. Um, uh, One of the central performances is that of Harry Earls, and the relationship between Harry Earls and Daisy Earls, their characters, Frida and Hans, is in many ways a type of heart and soul of this. I mean, there are many hearts in this film in terms of the sort of depth of warmth and the sort of protective nature of how some of the characters feel towards other. I mean, mention the character of, let's say, Madame Tetralini towards the people whom she refers to starting from very on in the film as her children, as a means of types of sense of protection against the quote unquote outside world. There's also the warmth between Hans and Frida, or perhaps the feelings that Frida has towards Hans, despite the fact that maybe even early on, almost at the very outset of the film, it seems very obvious that Hans's eyes are drifting to another woman who is Cleopatra. Therein lies the hook that will lead us into one of the main plot threads of the film, namely this love story tragedy, revenge drama that is occurring in the context of the relationship between Hans and Cleopatra. But the Frida Hans relationship is one of the very warm aspects of this work, and the way in which it's presented in the performances, very delicate, very sensitive. Daisy Earls and Harry Earls, it's really very brilliant. And also there are ways in which we follow certain characters, maybe expressed through their viewpoints, and I mentioned the Venus and Froso combination here, the Wallace Ford and Leela Hyam's characters. There's a lovely, almost slapstick comedy aspect to their performances. There is some sexual double entendre in some of their dialogue, and there's also a type of sincerity and warmth and earnestness to their blossoming relationship as we see it develop over the course of the films. And they are also our guides because they are very friendly with many of the people in the group, in the traveling group of performers, and through their eyes we see, or through their intros, we are in turn introduced to this world. And so, but also through their heart and through their maybe efforts, we also see just how much is at stake. Because when the goings really when the goings really turn up or turn on, they really turn on indeed. And so this thing really ignites like almost like it's a series of vignettes, but the pressure seems to very slowly but surely rise steadily until it explodes. And believe me, when it explodes, stand back, because you're in for a tumultuous and vicious and very biting ride indeed. And it's through that process and through all these processes, like being flung around like a ball in a pinball machine, in terms of the roller coaster of emotions. And when one reaches the very end, my goodness, what awaits you as you reach the very end of this film is one of the most famous or infamous denouements in terms of a cinema close from the 1930s. What a film this is. And my goodness, so much to talk about, so many twists and turns, and also so many levels of care and dynamism and shock, and indeed, yes, curiosity, fascination, and exploitation, question mark again. How one answers that question-marked question is something that you, the viewer, in terms of your own subjective experiences with this film, will have to decide on your own. But perhaps with some guidance or with some friendly suggestions from the good team at the Criterion Collection, who have presented this set, Tod Browning's Sideshow Shockers, and included in that set is one of the most unforgettable, one of the most controversial films ever made. And my goodness, it is still powerful even today. That is the film, which is Freaks. The Criterion Collection has released this film, Freaks, which is part of this multi-film set, which is called Tod Browning's Sideshow Shockers. And this set is in this glorious digipack release with the packaging. We'll talk a little bit about this later in the video. It is at spine number 1194 collectively. The films individually aren't assigned their own individual spine numbers, but that's okay. Because we take this collective set as a whole in terms of its spine numbering order, and Freaks being part of this collection. Now, I've also, for purposes of this video, before I started to press record, I pulled out the very robust and thick-paged booklet, staple booklet, and I love this for a number of reasons. Again, I'll talk about this later in this video, but on page 36, there is an explanation, a written explanation about the restorations, including Freaks. And so let me read, I quote, "Freaks is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.37 to 1. This new digital master was created from a 35mm nitrate dupe negative and a 35mm safety print, both of which were scanned in 5K resolution on a Laser Graphics Director film scanner at ProTech Vaults in Burbank, California. Color was done by Michel Hasidim at Resilon in New York. The original monaural soundtrack was restored by the Criterion Collection from an archival 2-inch magnetic soundtrack." Okay, so I have seen this film Freaks on VHS. I have seen this film Freaks on DVD, and now I see this film on the Criterion release for this year, this Blu-ray. And so I admit, my experience with this film has always been along for the ride in terms of its fairly frequent release history over the course of physical media over the years. But it had always had a lot of lore and history and legend and notoriety that surrounded it, a type of mystique that was always with the film. I remember when I first heard about it, just reading about it in a book once, and seeing one of the photo stills of this. It was written up in a way that suggested it was one of the most shocking and controversial films ever made ever made in Hollywood. So that added to the mystique and lore and allure for me to want to find this film as soon as I could. And when I did, it was really it was one of those films where I felt how do I process this? It was just one of those truly unforgettable experiences that I just felt over the years as I would periodically revisit this work. And then a DVD came along from the early 2000s, and I got that, and that for many years was my go-to in terms of watching this film. But now I have a new go-to in terms of the Blu-ray here by Criterion. So I'm very impressed with this. I'm very impressed. I grant you, I'm not so expert in this film to say that I know the very nooks and crannies of the film frames in terms of watching this in the theater experience. I've never seen this in the theater, unfortunately. So my experience has always been in terms of physical media releases over time. But be that as it may, or based on my own, granted, I admit, very limited experience in terms of the vastness of the release history of this film, or the mystery surrounding the release history of this film, I must say that I am very taken. I think this looks fabulous. I think it looks sharp and clear, and it sounds sharp and clear, but I love the sense that it doesn't feel overly produced in terms of the way it was restored. It feels very much faithful to its times, and I really admire that and appreciate that. There doesn't seem to be a sense of applying technology in a way that will take the film out of its time period, and so it's very faithful to the time period, but it is doing it in a way still that is showing us the film in the clearest, most direct way, or that's one way of looking looking at it. And if that's the mission statement in terms of the restoration, then I think mission accomplished. It has a very direct, raw power that I think is very evident when watching the film in this presentation. And I, for one, am incredibly impressed. Very, very impressed with this, the way it looks and sounds. This is going to be my go-to default disc to go to whenever I revisit this work, which is Freaks. So now let us turn our attention, if I may, to the supplements which can be found on this disc for the film Freaks. So once again, this is a set, and we'll talk a little bit more about the set overall, the packaging and the booklet, the essay, in a separate video. But for purposes of today, let's focus our attention on the material that is specific to or related to or part of the disc that is for the film Freaks. So once again, there are two discs. The other disc has the films The Unknown and The Mystic, which will be discussed in separate videos. And this other disc, or this disc, has the film Freaks. So there are two discs. One has The Unknown and The Mystic, and the other has Freaks. And so the film, the disc with Freaks is what I have in the player. And so this is the only film that is included on this disc. So first up, we have a commentary track. So this is a commentary track which is described as, this commentary track recorded in 2023 features author and Tod Browning biographer David J. Skal. To listen to the commentary while viewing the movie, press the audio key on your remote at any time. So this is, in terms of the Criterion release, this is the only commentary track that's made available as an option. It's a great commentary track. I've listened to it twice now, and David Skal is a really brilliant Tod Browning cinema academic expert. Truly, truly brilliant. And here we have a commentary track that is talking a lot about the behind the scenes aspects of this. The production history, I think, could be said to be its main focus, or one of the main foci. In terms of Tod Browning's filmography leading up to Freaks, working with performers and actors that he'd worked with before, such as Harry Earls, for example, and the work on earlier work called The Unholy Three. Also, just maybe some background information about Tod Browning's filmography as well. Some of his famous films, other than Freaks, were, for example, works that Tod Browning did in collaboration with the very famous performer Lon Chaney. One such film can be found elsewhere in the set, and we'll talk about it in a separate video, of course. But that is mentioned in the 2023 David Skal commentary track that's included here, as well as some interesting, maybe behind the scenes production level, maybe politics as well, and maneuvering in terms of the studio system, etc., in terms of the display of content during this time, early 1930s. The shock value, etc. So this is the David Skal commentary track 2023. So this commentary track is included. It ends also in a very interesting way. In terms of, it also discusses, or David Skal discusses too, some of the ways in which this film might have had different endings as well, and so the possibility of what those could have been. And David Skal really makes the case for just showing what some of the possibilities could be in terms not just of words and on a commentary track, but also in singing and trying to showcase certain aspects of opera. So that's a really interesting way that this commentary track turns. But in any event, this is the 2023 David Skal commentary track included for this Criterion release. Now, for those who know, there was actually a non-Criterion DVD that was released circa 2004, and I have that DVD, and it's I think it's still available. It's a Warner home video release. And in fact, on that DVD of the film Freaks, there was a commentary track accompanying that release, the 2003-2004 release. That was also by David Skal. It should be interesting to note, however, that Warner home video 2004-ish, circa 2004 commentary track by David Scull is not the same commentary track that we find with this 2023 David Scull commentary track. They're delivered and prepared by the same person, the same Tod Browning scholar, David Scull. It's just that one was done for the Warner Home Video DVD from early 2000s, and the other is done for this more recent 2023 Criterion Blu-ray release. They do cover some overlap or some grounds that are similar, but they also can be said to be covering different aspects. I would say that the 2003-2004 Warner Home Video DVD commentary track by David Scull would be, in my estimation, and I've heard it so many times because it's a really fascinating commentary track, but I would say that that commentary track from circa 2004 covers more ground in terms of the background of an explanation of a lot of the performers that we see part of the proceedings here in terms of the world of the film freaks. And so there's a lot of discussion about who these people were, their biographies, their backgrounds, and like Francis O'Connor and Prince Randian, Josephine Joseph, Johnny Eck, Schlitzie, the Hilton sisters, so Violet Hilton and Daisy Hilton, and the Earls, Harry Earls and Daisy Earls, and other members of the Earls family who are not necessarily featured in the film Freaks, but are also part of their performances, their acts. So, and other performers, I think, were given a lot of focus in terms of the background and explanation, biographical details by David Scull in that other 2004 commentary track. Not to say that those details are remaining untouched when we get to the Criterion 2023 commentary track, but I would say that there's less of a focus on that, on those details in this new commentary track than we had seen in the previous commentary track. So I don't know what the reason is. Was it licensing issues? I don't know. I can only speculate as to why that older commentary track wasn't used. I might hazard a guess to say that it is my understanding that there are we'll come to it when we talk about another of the supplements, which was about an hour-long documentary, a making of Freaks, which was also included with that 2003-2004 DVD, the Warner Home Video DVD. And that's also included actually with this Blu-ray. But before you play it, and in fact, it's right here. We'll talk about the supplements more or less. But there's a documentary that was carried over from that earlier DVD. It's called Tod Browning's Freaks, the Sideshow Cinema. And when you press the button and you play it, and I'll just show it right here, there's actually a little message here that says, "This documentary includes some derogatory terms that may be offensive. Viewer discretion advised." So there are certain terms that are used in this documentary that are also used in the 2004 commentary track. And so I don't know, I'm completely speculating here, but it could be something that maybe the commentary track might not have been used for licensing purposes, but it might have been something to do with the language that was used, because maybe the language or some terms that were used in that 2004 commentary track might be considered, or maybe are considered, or even now even more considered in terms of the possibility of offense. So that could be something. And in any event, I'm just relying on little clues that I see. For instance, this little label that begins or introduces, or is before the actual documentary starts. You didn't get this in the older 2004 DVD, by the way, so just to give you a little bit of heads up about that. So in any event, to be perfectly honest, I think that as much as I really admire the 2023 commentary track, I mean, I haven't heard it as much as the older commentary track, but I found the older commentary track to be really fascinating in terms of the content and what it was charting in terms of the explanation of Tod Browning's life and career in the context of Freaks. So Again, I can only speculate as to why it's not included, but we do have the 2023 commentary track to accompany one's journey of an exploration of the Tod Browning film Freaks, if you are so interested. Now, with the discussion of the commentary track, now let's turn our attention to the supplements, which we already begun a little bit in that discussion just now about the commentary track. But now when we go to the menu, we can go to the supplements section, and I've pressed the button and we have a number of supplements that are included. The first up is called Tod Browning's Freaks, the Sideshow Cinema. And this is indeed the documentary from 2004, the earlier Warner DVD. And it's approximately an hour and 3 minutes. And it's really, really informative, really great. It's divided into sections or chapters in and of itself, talking about the history of the film, Tod Browning, the performers, the sideshow performers themselves, and a little bit of background and detail in terms of their lives and biographies. Really fascinating. And I should point out, I think it's really a great and informative. David Scull also appears in that as well. The David Scull, who provides the commentary track for this as well, he also appears in terms of being interviewed for the hour, 3 minute or so documentary. I think it's a really informative documentary. I should just note a couple of things. First, there's that warning label that will say that there may be or there are terms that may be considered offensive, that are considered derogatory in terms of a discussion of these types of discussion points or topics. So please keep that in mind as well. And also, I should point out that for some reason, I'm not sure why that is, but if you notice, when I press the button, usually when you press the button, you'll get a little explanation note of what the supplement is, which I really like. I like those little explanation notes. But when I press the button here, you don't get that. You go right into the supplement. And so I'm not sure why that is. I really, I admit to being a little bit disappointed that the Criterion disc doesn't have these explanatory notes. I think it would have been really helpful to put the documentary in context. Notes like these that greet us when we watch the documentary. I understand their function. I understand the need for these. They have I think. Fair enough, reasonable enough. They have a very, I think, utilitarian function. But I think it would have been very helpful, especially if it was considered necessary to have a note like this, to also have included some kind of note to explain what the supplement is, which I miss. I miss that type of explanation in the sub menu of this. So it's a minor point, I know, but again, if context is what's important when delivering or providing some of these supplements, then I think a lot of context could have been provided very easily and very readily in an explanatory note, which unfortunately isn't included. Again, I don't know the reason why it's not included. We've seen them in all other Criterion releases, but for whatever reason, suddenly when I press the supplements section for this, and it's a very informative documentary, but we don't get any information except go straight into the documentary. But again, it's a very minor point. It does occur, by the way, for most of these other supplements, except for one, and we'll get to that towards the tail end of the discussion. But again, I think the documentary is incredibly valuable, and I think it has a lot of information that is delivered and presented by a lot of people who are expert in the field of Tod Browning and who know this film and who know the details of some of the performers and the backgrounds and biographies. So I think all in all, it's a very there's a lot of discussion points that are that I think draw one's attention even further to this film Freaks. So that's the first thing. Next up is Todd Robbins' Spurs, read by David J. Scull. And again, the same thing. You press the button and it goes right into a sort of audio, the audio reading and also words from David J. Scull. And again, David J. Scull is by now one can see the incredible position that David J. Scull has in those the academic world of sort of Tod Browning studies, and it's really great that we get this work, this dynamic, or this opportunity to get the underlying work. And so I admit this is for me the first time to become exposed to the story. I'd always known that the film Freaks was based upon the story Spurs because that was part of the opening titles of the film, but I was never able to track it down or discover what the story is. But now I get a sense of what this story is, the underlying story. So I love it when Criterion provides room for the original story upon which the film was based or from which the film was adapted, etc. So I really love that. Criterion does that every now and again, and when it does, it's such a learning experience, as is this. So there are really fascinating similarities and differences between the story Spurs and the film Freaks. So, and this is approximately 48 minutes, just in case you're interested. But once again, there is no supplements, sub-menu explanatory note, which I think would have been really helpful, but oh well, c'est la vie, c'est la vie. But now moving on to let me go back to the main menu here. And moving on to further discussion, the third supplement is called One of Us, Portraits from Freaks. And you press it again, and once again, it goes straight into these type of supplements. So no explanatory note again, which is, again, it's a shame because I really think those are very helpful. But in any event, focusing on the supplement itself, it's a very fascinating supplement. If you recall, well, actually, it's going through in terms of this kind of slideshow presentation, the portraits or little pictures and write-ups of many of the performers in the film Freaks, and many of the key players and key figures in the context of the film Freaks, including some of the actors. And so and some of the actors who are portraying the sideshow performers in the film. And this is totaling approximately 10 minutes. So this is also a wonderful, great slideshow presentation, photo gallery type of essay. It guides you along, and it's, I think, it's really well done. It's a high production value. It's really nice. I would say, once again, if you recall my comments about the way in which the new David Scull 2023 commentary track seems to be focusing more on the production history background of the film, whereas the older 2004 commentary tracks seem to be focusing more on the biographies of each of the performers. Of course, you do get both. You do get those aspects in either commentary but I'm just talking about the emphasis, how the emphasis is provided. So if one agrees with me in terms of looking at the 2023 commentary track as focusing more on the production history rather than on, say, the performer's backgrounds, one can look at this supplement as supplementing that aspect of that 2023 commentary track, because it does go into a little bit more of a focus on the performers and figures of this film. By the way, the 2004 Warner Home Video documentary, the first supplement here, also has a section in that documentary going over each of the main performers as well. So one can look at that documentary as well as supplementing the 2023 commentary track. But in any event, this is a well-produced and very interesting way of slideshow presentation, visual essay. So that's One of Us, Portraits from Freaks, approximately 10 minutes. And that's not all, because then we get Prologue to Freaks from 1947. And this is approximately 3 minutes. And again, you just go straight into it. So this is the kind of the opening pre-titles that accompany the release of this, and again described as being from 1947, with some this has some commentary from David Scull once again. So I think this is new. I don't seem to recall this prologue was made available in earlier say, non-Criterion physical media releases, as I recall, but never with this running ongoing commentary from David Scull. So that's very interesting. It's interesting to read the text and also see how this was handled during the re-release history of this. So this is again in the 1940s, so 10 plus years after, maybe 10, 15, almost 20 years after its original release. So that's also very fascinating. This is approximately 3 minutes, so please check this out if you can. One of the really fascinating things about Freaks 2, the film, is also its many wrinkles in terms of various release versions, changes, etc., and endings as well. And speaking of which, that brings us to the next supplement, which is called Alternate Endings. And once again, you press it, but it goes straight into the supplement. It doesn't give us any context in terms of any explanatory notes, which is a shame. So I would say, yes, this is approximately 6 minutes. It does go, David Scull does describe, or it's described elsewhere, about how the film might have ended in a different way. And so here we get I'll try to, I don't want to show too much again for the benefit of those who have not yet seen this film, Freaks, but it does show kind of commentary, again, supported by the great comments from David Scull as to what could have been. It doesn't show the actual like ending in a vault, that was taken, but it shows, it has kind of explains what could have been, what might have been planned but maybe wasn't shot, or what was originally planned but how it differs from the actual final film, how it changed, what are some details that try to change in terms of the the characterization of some of the characters that we have at the very climax of the film, etc. So it's giving us an idea of what had been planned, what could have been, again with this type of running commentary. 6 minutes, and you do get some more information about this elsewhere, and saying some of the commentary tracks, etc. But it's interesting to see what the setup is, and how this the actual filming and ending of the film was handled. So. This isn't new for anyone who might have seen or have Freaks, the film, on earlier non-Criterion DVD releases, for example. So, but again, just in case you're interested, because it is an example of a really fascinating release history and planning, and again, what could have been in terms of what had been planned, or the what could have been planned. So, anyway, there's that supplement. Then going back to the main menu, let's go to the final supplement here, which is called Ticklish Business Podcast from 2019. And I press it, and lo and behold, look at this. We have at last a write-up or an explanatory note. So again, it's very curious as to why the note occurs here, but it hasn't occurred in other of the supplements. So again, so for someone who really appreciates this type of contextual information, I miss that. I really miss that for the other supplements. I really wish Criterion could have included it for the other supplements, but at least we have the final supplement here, which is a podcast episode, and it's described as such. Kristen Lopez is the film editor at The Wrap and started this podcast in 2016. Her first book, But Have You Read the Book? 52 Literary Gems That Inspired Our Favorite Films, came out in 2023. Samantha Ellis blogs at Musings of a Classic Film Addict and is working on a cookbook inspired by old Hollywood recipes. In this 2019 episode, they discuss disabled representation in Freaks with independent producer Drea Clark. Okay, so this is a Ticklish Business podcast, audio podcast episode. It is approximately 52 minutes. It's my first time to have listened to this podcast, and I didn't know this podcast prior to getting this disc. So, I'm very limited in terms of my knowledge. I have a very, very shallow knowledge of the podcast episodes in the podcast world. So I apologize for not knowing this podcast before, but being that this was my first time listening to it, I was fascinated to interesting to know what I might get when I press play. And I got a very fascinating discussion about what it says here, representation of disabilities in the film. And it's interesting too because I think there is one of the participants in this podcast, I understand, is also acknowledges how the person is speaking from sort of context of one's own personal experience in the context of disability. So, in that way, I think this conversation is very well informed, and in that way, in other ways, I should say, it's very well informed. It does talk, I think, in very positive terms about how I think the conversation does go into arguments as to how this film Freaks is not going into the realm of exploitation, but rather is handling and treating the contents and the subject matter and the performers, I think, with a great deal of respect. I think that's the tone of the conversation. So, I mean, it's a very fascinating take, and again, also done, I think, from 2019, so it's a fairly modern, or yes, it is quite a modern or a very recent discussion. So I think that's also very interesting. It's also a nice counterpoint to the great conversation points from David Scull and the commentary track and the 2004 documentary and elsewhere. So, but this, and also I should say, Ticklish Business podcast episode, I think it speaks about the film in very respectful tones. It also speaks about the attitudes and approaches to this film and other commentaries and commentators on it. It also speaks about those as well, maybe in somewhat of a, maybe sometimes obliquely, sometimes directly, but always, I think, in a very respectful manner. So I appreciate that very much. So a very illuminating conversation. So I'm glad it was included here. I'm glad also for this explanatory note in the Blu-ray menu. It's a shame for the other supplements about that, but oh well, it's good that we have that here. Again, I don't mean to keep repeating myself on that. And again, I acknowledge it's a minor point, but at the same time, context is really important. And I think the more context provided, especially with details of a film like Freaks, I think the more context that's provided, I think the better. So and that's what I mean. So, but in any event, be that as it may, the contents of the supplements here, I think, are amazing and very informative, very enlightening, and they go in many different directions and much to think about, much to consider, and a lot is here, that's for sure, including a new commentary track for 2023. If you have that older Warner DVD, you might want to hold on to it. It does have, most of those supplements, as I mentioned, are carried over to this new Criterion Blu-ray, so that's good news. But if you want to hold on to the DVD for the commentary track that's there but not here, then that might be something to consider going forward. But in any event, I still find the 2023 new commentary track to be very informative in its own ways. So it's certainly something to consider when exploring this work, which is Tod Browning's Freaks. Now, to conclude our conversation of this release in the context of this Criterion release and the film Freaks, I just point your attention to the booklet. This robust, stable booklet. I love it, and I love the design. We will talk in a separate video about the packaging details and the essay itself, because the essay, the Farron Smith Nemi essay, Tod Browning's Ballyhoo Art, could be said to be a comprehensive one, talking and charting aspects of Tod Browning's career writ large, also touching upon all of the films, because again, we are reminded that this is a multi-film, multi-disc set that has other films in the Tod Browning canon, So this essay is in fact overarching and quite wide in scope, and it's really wonderful in that way. But so we will talk about the essay and aspects of this booklet with a little bit more detail in a separate video. But for purposes of today, let me just point your attention to some aspects of the booklet that are focusing specifically on Freaks. For example, there is a section starting on page 4 and continuing on through to pages 6, 7, 8, and 9 with regard to Freaks in terms of a quick write-up or story synopsis, details about the technical specifications. The years, 1932, 62 minutes, black and white, monaural, 1.37 to 1 aspect ratio, and also cast listing, credits listing, etc., and some pictures with, for instance, this, which is somewhat mirrored in terms of what is used in terms of the image. for purposes of this really memorable Blu-ray menu. So that's one part of the booklet that is focused on the film. Also, one can say that the Theron Smith-Nemi essay does have a section that could be said to be focusing specifically on the film Freaks, so as well as specific sections on the other films, The Mystic and The Unknown, which again will be films that will be the subject of other video discussions over the course of the next series of videos uploaded to this channel. But one can say that the part of Theron Smith-Nemi's essay that is focusing on Freaks starts on page 32. And so you can read that as well if you are looking for a really great discussion. I mean, it's a great essay overall, so we'll talk a little bit more about that in a separate video. But my dear friends, that is, yes, that's where I want to end today in terms of a discussion on the Criterion release, Tod Browning's Sideshow Shockers, and specifically on one of the films included in this very great release, the one-of-a-kind, unforgettable, controversial, and what a film this is, for reasons which I've tried to articulate over the course of today in this video. Tod Browning's Freaks. Wow. Alright. Tod Browning's Freaks is in the Criterion collection in this Blu-ray set. Wow. What a film this is. So, my dear friends, that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies, including the works of Tod Browning, including Freaks, The Unknown, The Mystic, and others, including other films in the Criterion collection and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.